first started running around together and doing things. And he was more than a true blue friend, though. He was a faithful brother in the faith that we both share. We went to meetings together for over 62 years, off and on with Doug and Claire's. And he valued that above everything in life. We enjoyed a very close brother-sister relationship with them. And so they've now, in the last 10 years or so, they bought a house in Arizona right around the corner from us, where we live 6 months in the winter. And it mentions in the obituary about they retired him and gave him a set of golf clubs. Well, he got into that golf with a fervor. I mean, he was after it. So we went playing golf a lot. And we played golf in Alaska. And we played golf in Hawaii. And we played golf in Death Valley, 267 feet below sea level. And even on things we're not going so good, he'd say, "Oh, Myron, the grass is green, the birds are singing, the sun is shining, it's time to just enjoy the day." And that's what we did a lot. And there's such a flood of memories at a time like this. How in the world do you recap it? You just can't. And there is a couple of little things, though. One time, well, there was this little watering hole, farmer watering hole in the town of Minidoka, called the Minidoka Cafe. And we'd go there and have coffee quite frequently in the morning. And we were in there having a nice, sitting around this table having a nice little coffee one morning. And boy, through the door comes Clarice, wide open, and she was all muddy. And she says, "Where have you been and what are you doing? I've been looking everywhere for you. We've got a ditch break and I can't stop it. I can't get it stopped." He stands up, Doug stands up, and he says, "Well, Myron, I guess this coffee break is over." It was hilarious. And so off they went. But he was always up for some fun and some good times. And we'd drag race our pickups out on the Minidoka Highway and just different things. But to get him excited, I mean, he didn't get excited about that ditch break. He went and took care of it. But I've always said, you couldn't get him excited even if he had dynamite. And I did like calling him the gentle giant. I'd call him the gentle giant. And he's always ready for a good time and some fun and hilarious times. One thing to remember, though, he was only 28 years old when they came to Idaho and put down their roots. He said the first time they drove up to Idaho, all they saw was sagebrush, sand, and wind. And from there, that's what it is today. And the memories are just, as watching this video here, the memories were just such a flood that you can't put it in words. But one thing about him is that I always I envied his spirit. He always had such a wonderful spirit about things, and I envied that spirit that he had. And I did say, when I heard of his passing, I said, if there's ever a person ready to meet his maker, it was Douglas. Thank you.
scenes of Galilee. Oh, rejoice and be forever glad. We have found him, come and see. We have found him, joy of the ages, and our song with heaven's gladness rings. We have found the Christ of whom the prophets spake. We have found him, King of kings. Ye who hunger for the living word, ye who thirst for living springs, come each waiting heart with joy is stirred by the song the herald sings. We have found him, joy of the ages, and our song with heaven's gladness rings. We have found the Christ of whom the prophets spake. We have found him, King of kings. This same Christ who taught beside the sea walks upon the earth today, and he comes in lowliness to thee, temple still in mortal clay. We have found him, joy of the ages, and our song with heaven's gladness rings. We have found the Christ of whom the prophets spake. We have found him, King of kings. We have found him, bear the tidings far, wheresoever men are found, until all who seek the guiding star shall in light and peace abound. We have found him, joy of the ages, and our song with heaven's gladness rings. We have found the Christ of whom the prophets spake. We have found him, King of kings.
We'll have a word of prayer. Our Father, we're thankful for this privilege today. Truly is a privilege to witness another faithful finish of one of thy children. And we're thankful that you ever shared thy Son with us and all that he taught us, and that we have found his words to be life to us. And we were mindful of what he taught us about the sower and the seed today, and the powerful combination of a good farmer and good seed and good soil. We're thankful for Doug's life and how he taught us that lesson in more ways than one. We're thankful for his good and honest heart, and that you were able to sow thy perfect seed in his heart, and he kept it till his last day. And we just pray that we could find courage, as he did, to face life with an honest heart, even to face today with an honest heart, that seeds of truth from thee could be sown. For we ask these favors in thy Son's name.
The living words of Jesus to me are precious seed. They offer peace and guidance. Do thorns now rule in me? The evil one would rob me. The precious seed would steal. No fruit will ever sweeten in hearts with hardness sealed. Divine is that blessed message, like living seed to me. I cherish and obey it, reap life eternally. The sowers at his bidding have left their homes behind. The precious seed to scatter, impelled by love divine, with promise of the harvest, the gospel is made known. Come sunshine or come storm clouds, a hope of heaven is sown. Divine is that blessed message, like living seed to me. I cherish and obey it, reap life eternally.
I'd like to start with some verses in Psalm 119. Earlier this week, Pam sent me some pictures of Doug's Bible and of this chapter specifically, and every place the word "word" is mentioned, or statute, or something that refers to the Word of God, Doug had it underlined. And so, in memory of him, I started reading this psalm. And so in the 9th verse, and 10th and 11th verse, it says, "Wherewithal shall a young man cleanse his way? By taking heed thereto according to thy word. With my whole heart have I sought thee. O let me not wander from thy commandments. Thy word have I hid in mine heart." And I met Doug and Clarice my second year in this ministry. And it was here in Rupert and Burley and Twin Falls, and I still am just a young city kid, and so I didn't know much of farming. And I remember one gospel meeting I was speaking about the seed, and that verse where Jesus said, "Except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abides alone. But if it die, it will bring forth much fruit." And so I made the comment that you don't plant half seeds, and you don't plant broken seeds. You plant whole seeds. And so I tried to liken that to our life. We don't just give half our life. We don't give a part of our life. We want to give our whole life. And I tried to liken it to we want to be willing for all of the words of Jesus, not just half of them or a quarter of them. And so anyway, after the meeting, We're shaking hands, and I think this is when Doug and I became friends. And I remember he put his arm around my shoulder, and I felt like just a little kid under his arm, and he said, "We should do an experiment." And so we did, and he did one and I did one, the exact same, and we planted 4 types of seed, 10 on wet paper plates and Ziploc bags, and we planted 10 whole seeds of each type, and we planted 10 half seeds and 10 broken seeds, and then we just waited to see what would happen. And 100% of the whole seeds sprouted, put out a root and put out a stalk, and 50% of the broken seeds, or the half seeds, sprouted to some extent, and less than that of the broken seeds. And then a couple days later, the whole seeds, they just kept doing good, but the half seeds, they kind of stopped really growing, and they lost a little bit of their color. And a couple more days later, we noticed that a mold started forming on the broken seeds and on the half seeds, and seemed like once the mold started, that the plant just withered. A couple days later, the mold formed on the whole seeds too, but they didn't stop growing. They just kept growing. And so it just seemed evident. Give your whole life. Plant the whole seed. It comes with a guarantee. And we heard the hymn, the first hymn, "We have found him, joy of the ages." And that hymn was chosen for this service by Doug himself. And he considered it to be his testimony. We have found him of whom the prophets speak. We have found him, joy of the ages. And I just love the picture we have today of a full life. 92 years. And the joy he found in the beginning is the joy he died with, and it had only grown. And what he rejoiced in when he found the Christ is something he continued to be able to rejoice in. And so I thought of this verse, "Wherewithal shall a young man cleanse his way?" And Doug met the gospel as a young man, and it appealed to his heart. He'd found the joy of the ages. And the early years here in Idaho, like Myron alluded to, they weren't easy years. A lot of dry years, hard years, tough years. But a young man and a young wife and a young family, they had something within them that gave them joy in those years and helped them to keep going and keep persevering. And in verse 30 of Psalm 119, it says, "I have chosen the way of truth. Thy judgments have I laid before me." And I just thought of a young man and a young family learning how to make good choices and learning what has true value. And then the next verse says, "I have stuck unto thy testimonies." And I just loved thinking of Doug and his family as just getting started. They're just learning to make good choices in life, learning the value of the Word of God, learning the value of the way of God, and not just learning how to choose that, but sticking to it And today we have his testimony before us of what's possible when we stay true to God. And then in verse 33, these verses made me think of Doug especially. He said, "Teach me, O Lord, the way of thy statutes. Give me understanding. Make me to go in the path of thy commandments, for therein do I delight. Incline my heart unto thy testimonies. Turn away mine eyes from beholding vanity. Establish thy word unto thy servant, who is devoted to thy fear." And I just liked thinking of it like this: a young man who was learning to make good choices became a man who was teachable, and a man with understanding, and a man who was devoted to something greater than himself. And he became a man who was committed. And I think it was here in Twin Falls area, Rupert, that I first heard this saying, and some of you have maybe heard it countless times, that what will a farmer do if you give him $1 million? Well, he'll just farm until it's gone. And because it's not just an occupation to a farmer, it's who he is. It's what he's committed his life to. And made me think about Adam and Eve in the beginning of the Bible, the first man. And we know the story of their sin. And one of the consequences of their sin was that the ground wouldn't just bring forth a harvest of itself, but they would have to work for it. They'd have to sweat. They'd have to toil. It wouldn't just happen for them. And so the first man became the first farmer. And the first farmer realized this is going to take a lot of work. It doesn't just happen. And so I liked just thinking of Doug and those in that light, even naturally. Found out in the early 60s this is going to take a lot of work. But where do we go? What else do we do? There's nowhere else to go. There's nothing else to do. So we'll just work harder. And so they worked harder. And we see the results of that today with Grant 4D. But especially I just enjoyed thinking not just of Doug as a man and farmer, but as a child of God. And what he committed himself to. And I was thinking of Adam as the first farmer, and as farming developed, and like when did Adam, or when did it come to mind, I wonder if an animal would help plow the field, and how many different types of animals did they try before settling on the ox, and how many different types of yoke did they design before settling on the one that really worked, and how many times did they fail before they finally succeeded? And a farmer has to be teachable, has to be willing to learn from experience, has to apply the knowledge gained in the past to the present, and be willing to learn for the future. And Doug wasn't just that as a man, he was that as a child of God, and he was committed to something greater than himself, and committed to learn and to be teachable, and committed to applying the things he learned. He devoted himself to that. And then going on in Psalm 119. In verse 65 says, "Thou hast dealt well with thy servant, O Lord, according to thy word." And just thought of a young man learning to make good choices, becoming a teachable man and a committed man, a devoted man, and that same man becoming a servant. And my friendship with Doug, like Myron's, included golf also. And pretty much 100% of our correspondence and conversation at some point included golfing or how our golf game was going. And there's things that make golf a great game. And those same reasons also make it maybe the most frustrating game. And I don't know, you could tell me, those of you, I thought, well, maybe farming's the same way. The things that make it great can be the most frustrating parts of it. But one thing I like about golf is that there's no two shots that are exactly the same. The ball is lying a little bit differently. The course in front of you is just a little bit different. The angles, the ups and downs, what you're shooting for, what's in front of you. It can be very similar, but they're all a little bit different. And yet, at the same time, there's certain principles that you can apply to every single shot. Keep your shoulders square, keep your head down, keep your eye on the ball, keep the same swing plane. And just thought about, well, that's life. No 2 days are exactly the same. There's a lot of similar days, but each day is a little different. No two experiences are exactly the same. No two moments are exactly the same. No 2 years. And yet, each day and each moment, each experience, there are principles that we can apply. And I just love to think about Doug and the principles that he learned to apply in life. Walk by faith. Be humble. Keep your eye on Christ. Keep your heart in it. Give your whole life to this. So no matter what the experience was, no matter if it was a good lie or a bad lie, no matter if the green was right in front of him or if it was around the bend corner, no matter what life threw at him, he knew how to apply the right principles. And that made him a servant that God could trust, and made him a father that was trustworthy, a husband that was trustworthy, a farmer, a community member, a retiree, a brother that we all could trust. And the God of heaven made a statement about Abraham, and he just said this, "For I know him. I know how he'll respond." And I just thought, how many of us here and the God of heaven himself, I knew Doug. I know Doug. I know how he's going to respond. We just heard from Myron. I know he's not going to get worked up. I know he's not going to get a wrong spirit. And how much we appreciated that about him. And in Ecclesiastes 7, Solomon makes this statement: "It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. For that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to heart." And so there's something here for us to lay to our heart. It's not for Doug anymore, it's for us. And I was thinking about that hymn we sang, or we heard sung. The living words of Jesus to me are precious seed. There's a lot of people in life that are willing to work hard. And there's a lot of people in life who are willing to commit themselves to something and willing to give themselves. I just was thinking again today, thinking about a farmer and how hard they work and what they do to, how, like it's so clear, like what would the work be worth if there wasn't a seed in the ground? If you work day and night, 24/7, working the soil, tilling the soil, but you never planted any seed, what would it be worth? In that experiment that Doug and I did, we had one type of seed that it was barley, and it never sprouted. The whole seed, the half seed, the crushed seed, none of them sprouted. And so we just determined it's bad seed. And so what's hard work worth? What's commitment worth if you're not using the right seed? God said, or Paul wrote about God in Galatians, that God is not mocked. A man will reap what he sows. And this is something to lay to heart today, because we see clearly what Doug's reaping was, the harvest of his life. And it gives us opportunity to look to our own. And so I just thought of Doug being able to say, the living words of Jesus to me are precious seed. That was what he committed himself to. That's what was planted in him. And then the second verse of that hymn says, my heart is soil for sowing. And it asks the question, do stones have possession there? Do thorns now rule in me? And we hear about the parable of the sower and the seed, and makes us think about our heart and what's growing there, what's hindering growth there. And then the last verse says, the sowers at his bidding have left their homes behind. And I stand here today with much thankfulness, because one thing Doug never failed to do was encourage me to keep sowing, to keep sharing the words of Jesus. And I got a letter from him at least once a month. And the last letter was just a couple weeks ago, and Pam had to finish it for him. And I know that I'm far from the only one that he was faithful to encourage. And so I just give thanks for the seed that he loved, the seed of the words of Jesus. I thought of him singing the chorus, divine is that blessed message, like living seed to me. I cherish and obey it and reap life eternally. And our comfort today is that he's reaping that life that he lived for, and we give thanks for that. And we'll close this part of the service with Amazing Grace, and we'll invite the singers back to the front and the grandchildren also who will be singing with them.
shall